So this is the first of 3 videos on adding vectors, and this is about the idea of adding vectors tip to tail and reminders on how we set up bearings. So when we have vectors addition, I want to add vectors. Let's say I had vector A, and that vector is pointing north. To that I want to add vector B. Let's say it's pointing somewhere up into the northeast quadrant, we're not sure where yet. And I want to get a value of that as the resultant vector in the form of A plus B is equal to R, the resultant. When I do vector addition like this, and we use tip to tail method, what we do is we draw our first vector A, then we draw our second vector B, and that second vector starts where the first vector ended. Then our resultant goes from the beginning of A to the end of B. So tip to tail, one vector, finish the first vector, draw the second vector. Our resultant goes from the start of the first, from the end of the first, starts at the end of the first and goes to the end, right? Our resultant goes from the start of the first to the end of the second. I also could have drawn that same system as going my vector B. To it I add vector A, and I get a resultant that shows me the same thing, really, going from the start of B to the end of A here, but I'm ending up in the same location. Those are the same addition. They get me to the same place. When I want to set up bearings, just a reminder for our bearing discussion, we have 4 main directions that we consider, right? We have north, we have south, we have east, and we have west. When we want to describe a vector, we have to describe it in terms of those 4 cardinal directions and then modify it in some way. So if I had a vector that was pointing this way up into the northeast quadrant and I want to describe it, I have to describe it either as heading north and having been modified or heading east and having been modified. So I think about this as being a north pointing vector that's now been altered. I am moving at some angle like that, and let's call that theta. So I was heading east, but I've modified it by going slightly. I was heading north, but I've modified it by moving to the east. So this is some angle that is east of north. Or I could describe the same angle in terms of east, and I've modified it by moving it to the north. So that angle there would be an angle, and that's, let's call this angle beta. Here, this would be an angle that is north of east, because I was heading east and modified it by going north. Those 2 vectors would add to 90 degrees. And both are correct descriptions of the bearing of an angle. They're just coming out from slightly different ways. You could either one would be correct for a final answer, but when you want to set up vector addition, you need to follow sort of this pattern for adding vectors, right? If I had that as my vector, this part here would be an angle that is west of north. This one would be north of west. If my vector was like that, this angle would be heading south but modifying to the west. So that's west of south. This angle is south of west. Come over here, I have have east of south, and I have south of east.